Good morning, everybody. This is Zach Said It Again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and I'm honored to have with me on the phone the spa guy. Now, your name is what?
Billy.
Billy is your actual name.
That's my real name, yes.
And you are from Nashville?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee, yes.
Well, it is a great honor to have you on my podcast. Thank you for being with me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
What has drawn me the most, or what I usually do, is I do a podcast to back up an editorial column that I write. And my column is on the new Elvis movie. Now, have you seen the new Elvis movie, and what is your opinion?
Yes, I have, of course.
And what is your opinion on that?
Well, it is about 80% false.
Yes.
That would be my first thought on it. And what I mean by that is if you're looking for something that is historically accurate, then this movie is not the movie for you.
Not the way to go. And
they took a lot of liberties, and I think from a standpoint of, they tried to say that part of their reason that they took the liberties was time constraints, but I would disagree with that. I mean, you could tell the correct story just as in the same amount of time that you could tell the incorrect story.
Right.
And in my opinion, Elvis's story is fascinating enough. The way it really is, you don't really have to. You don't have to do anything special to make it more special. It stands on its own. It's pretty fascinating the way it really happened.
Right, right. Now, I am not, as you clearly are, I am not what you would call an Elvis superfan.
Right.
I would say that I am in awe of the star quality of Elvis Presley.
Yes.
Elvis Presley, you and I are just two old Southern boys.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get underneath all that, so was Elvis. So I think what makes me so in awe of him is that a typical Southern boy, just like you and me, has an extraordinary gift and an extraordinary talent and becomes, as we know him today, who is the biggest star in the world.
Without really any training of any kind. He just did what he did.
And there is, to this day, no bigger star in the world than Elvis Presley.
I would say that is factual. He's passed away. Next week will be 45 years, or the first of the following week. It'll be 45 years, and I can still go, I go around the world filming Elvis history, and it still opens doors today. I can go in a place and say the name Elvis, and they will pull out the red carpet and want to tell me everything that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. All you got to do is say that name.
Now, do you have, this may be a dumb question, do you have any personal connection to Elvis? How did you become from a super fan to becoming the spa guy, who has a pretty decent following yourself?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a following. That's a great question. Not something that I set out to do. I became a fan, and no, I don't have any particular connection to Elvis Presley. I've never met him. He died when I was 12 years old, and I lived in a little town in North Carolina at that time. And a neighbor friend of mine, his name's Troy Robinson. Troy, we were friends in school, and he invited me to his house, and he lived about a block and a half from my house. And so one day I went over to Troy's house, and when I went in his bedroom, he had a collection of records, of albums standing up. I remember them being over in the corner in his room, and there was a lot of albums. And when I say a lot, I'm going to say there was probably 40 or 50 albums, and I remember them standing up, not laying flat. Over in the corner of his room, he had like a stand that they were in. And I asked him about them, and he said, "Oh, that's my collection of Elvis records." And so he started pulling them out and showing them to me, and played a couple of them. And I ended up buying the Aloha from Hawaii concert on cassette tape from him for $1. I would have been in the 7th grade. And I remember going back to my house, and actually we lived in a trailer at the time. And we had one of those old cassette players, you stick the cassette in flat, push it down, had a little door. And I remember laying in my bed and listening to that concert on that cassette recorder and just falling in love with the music, the way it sounded. It was just something special about it, and I really liked that. So then I wanted to start learning about who this person was. So back then, which would have been 1977, he hadn't died yet. This happened just a couple of months before he passed away. And at that time, you really couldn't find much about him, as far as books and that kind of stuff. As soon as he died, basically every store that you walked into, whether it be a convenience store or the dollar store or whatever, or a grocery store, there was always a new magazine every month with new Elvis stuff and photographs and that kind of stuff. So that's really kind of how I got started, was reading magazines. And then I started going over to the books. My 9th grade book report was a book that, you remember they did Scholastic Reader back then.
Oh, yeah.
And what you could do is buy the books. They would be very inexpensive, so you could pay $3 for a book or whatever. And the book was just simply titled Elvis Presley. And I did my 9th grade book report on that, and just was fascinated by the story. And then you start learning about all these different characters in the story. You've got Elvis, of course, but then you've got the Memphis Mafia. You got Reg, you got Sonny, you got Joe Esposito, you got Priscilla, you got Linda, you got Ginger. There's all these characters in this story, and each one of them has their own story inside that. So I just always thought it was fascinating. And I got married in 1987, and the first real vacation that I took, my wife and I went to Graceland in 1988. It was July the 4th weekend. And I borrowed a camera. There was always something inside of me that wanted to film Elvis stories. And I can't really tell you why, but it was just that thing. But back then, the video cameras, the quality was terrible. But I had a guy that was a friend of mine that happened to own a video camera, and I borrowed it, took it with me. And I actually filmed some stuff at the mausoleum. I filmed at the house. And I ended up leaving my wife. We'd been married, a little over a year, and I ended up leaving her in the hotel room and going and jumping over the fence at Graceland and going behind the house and going in the barns and taking photographs and all that kind of stuff. And, I was lucky. I got caught, but they didn't arrest me. They didn't have me arrested. They just held me for a period of time. But I can't really tell you what the fascination is with it. But I can tell you this, that it's a lot of fun to go film stories, find things. I was lucky enough to find the ambulance that they transported Elvis in on the last day of his life. Probably the last vehicle he was alive in. There's, you hear different stories about that day, but in most cases, they actually defibbed him at the hospital. You don't defib somebody that's in rigor mortis. So the stories that he was in full rigor when they picked him up, I do not find to be accurate. I have eyewitness testimony from people that I've interviewed that saw him that said that he had a faint heartbeat when he got there. And they worked on him, they defibbed him, they tried to bring him back, and they just, to no avail. But I found that. I actually figured out that there's a bicycle that was at Graceland in the smokehouse, has been there since they moved there in 1957. and I proved that that bicycle was Elvis's first bicycle, and it's been removed from the smokehouse now. They've restored it, and it's actually in the museum, saying that it was his first vehicle. And so I've been lucky enough to find a lot of things. I've been to Germany, where Elvis was in the Army. I've been to Paris, where he went while he was in the Army. I've been all over the Netherlands, where the Colonel was from. I've been to the spot where the Colonel was born in Breda, Holland, or in the Netherlands. Breda is what they call it. So I've had a lot of time over in Europe with the Elvis stuff, but I've also filmed all over the United States. Most recently, we went to the crater in Winslow, Arizona. That there's home movies of Elvis and Priscilla and the entourage there in 1968. And there's, or it could have been 67, I think 68 from my memory. And I filmed in Sedona, which he filmed a Western called Stairway Joe. It was somewhat of a Western, and he filmed some of it in Sedona and some of it in Cottonwood. And then we went and filmed up north of Los Angeles, where he filmed some pieces to a couple of different movies, Spin Out, and what was the other movie that was up in there? Speedway. And we filmed those kinds of things, and then went back to Las Vegas and filmed some stuff. So it's the most fun of it is going out and filming and talking to people and finding things and doing lineups and finding where this scene from this movie happened right here. Those kinds of things. It's just a lot of fun.
Well, tell me, how are you the spa guy?
All right, that's a great question. I am the spa guy because I own a hot tub company in Nashville called the Spa Guy. We do hot tub sales and service, and I actually own a company called Hot Tub Parts of America. I own American Spa Parts, Nashville Spa Covers, the Spa Guides. All of those are under the same umbrella. And Hot Tub Parts of America, and also own Hot Tub Parts of America Global, which is a worldwide hot tub parts company. And basically the way I make a living is I sell hot tub parts online. That's the biggest part of my company. I started as a hot tub repairman, just in my pickup truck going out and fixing hot tubs, and then it led to selling hot tubs, and then selling parts online, and one thing led to another. And basically, a man told me a long time ago, he said the key to success is, he said that you make 80% of your money off of 20% of what your business does. The key to it is figuring out what that 20% is and getting rid of the 80 that's not really making you money. So that's what I've done. I've basically narrowed it down to where I only pretty much sell hot tub parts online now. And it's been very good to me and my family. So it gave me the ability to be able to go out and do this Elvis stuff, and even create the museum that's in Memphis, 2 miles from Graceland, the Tiger Man Karate Dojo Museum. I lived there for almost 9 months, about 5 days a week, building that museum, which is where Elvis practiced karate at in the building. And I actually went there and more or less hand-built a museum in a building that Elvis had been in. He got his 7th and 8th degree black belt in that building in 1973, 1974 from his karate instructor, Connery. And I was lucky enough to go film that story at that building. It was a machine shop. And I told the guy that if the building's ever for sale, to call me first. And he did. He called me one day and said, "Hey, just want to let you know the building's for sale." So I put together a plan and purchased the building and went and turned it into a museum, and put the ambulance in it, of course, and other artifacts. And a lot of the artifacts were related to the Elvis story. And what I'm saying is, when I go out and film the story, I may have an artifact from that story that I put in the museum, and then when we're taking people through on the tour, I can say that this artifact is related to this story. Like we found, Trey and I have a sidekick that I filmed with Trey. Globetrotting with Trey is his channel on YouTube. And Trey and I were standing in a graveyard in Tupelo, Mississippi at Orville Bean's grave, which was Vernon. When Elvis was born, Orville Bean would have been the landlord and also Vernon's boss at the time. And we thought that it was a possibility. A lot of people may not know that Elvis was a twin, and the first child died. His name is Jesse Guerin. And nobody really knows where that child is buried at. There's no definitive answer to that question. So we were thinking about maybe the child could be born or could be buried where Orville Bean was buried, because that would have been his boss at the time and his landlord. And it's possible he would have given him a grave plot there. So we were standing at that grave talking about that and filming, and this guy walks up and said, you know, what are you guys doing? And we have a conversation with him, tell him about the Elvis stuff. And after about 20 minutes, he speaks up and goes, you know, 1955, my teacher gave me a book that Elvis had written his name in. And actually, I'm telling you wrong. It was not 55. It was 56. And so I said, well, you know, I thought he was going to say he sold the book or something. I said, well, what did you do with it? He said, I still got it. You want to see it? And, you know, it was one of those happenstances. He didn't know what we were there doing. And I had no idea he had a book that Elvis wrote his name in. So I went down to his house. We looked at the book. And what I was amazed at is a guy could walk in a room and come out with a book that somebody gave him in 1956. I can't find stuff I bought last week, you know, and he came out with that. And sure enough, Elvis wrote his name in that book in either 1946 or 1947. He would have been in the 6th grade. And his teacher's name was Miss Camp. And Miss Camp is who gave this guy that book in 1956. And he kept that book all these years. And a friend of mine, after discovering the book, I called in all my friends that were collectors, and a friend of mine, Tennessee Ted, purchased the book, and we have that in the museum as well with that story. And that is the oldest Elvis signature that is not in Graceland. And we found it standing, just happened to be run into a guy that had it standing in a graveyard in Tupelo.
Wow. Well, I want to ask you about some particular videos that I enjoyed very much because they were near my hometown. I have lived all my life in Wytheville, Virginia, which is at the crossroads of the crossing of Interstates 81 and 77. I'm sure that up and down the road you've been through here many times, but it's about 75 miles west of Roanoke. So if
77 goes past Roanoke, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we were driven through there going to Roanoke.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were heading to Maryland at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably it's the halfway point between Florida and the Great Lakes. About 8,000 people. Very Mayberry-like. At any rate, your video, the half-hour one about Elvis's visit to, or his 3 visits rather to, well, a total of 5, but 3 visits to Roanoke Civic Center. In the 70s. That would have been, if I'd been alive and gone to see Elvis, that would have been where I would have gone to see him. I've seen several concerts there. I've stayed at Hotel Roanoke, where I didn't know he stayed, which I thought was very interesting, and you did a wonderful history of that. And
it's a very nice hotel.
Yes.
By the way.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And very fortunate to have stayed there, especially knowing that Elvis has been there. And it's pretty interesting to know that it cost about people that went to see him paid about $15. It's about $73 in today's money. And now my favorite performers are Genesis, and when my daughter and I got to see them and my wife, that was about $250 a pop. So to be able to see Elvis for that kind of money, I think was quite a steal.
Yes. In today's money, Elvis would be a billionaire.
Oh, yes.
He didn't make very much money. In the 70s, he made about $4 million a year.
Yeah.
Which is still a lot of money, don't get me wrong. In the 70s, it was a lot of money. But it's still, compared to what his potential would have been in today's dollars, that was nothing.
Right.